There's something about being a twin that most people don't understand, not unless they've lived it. Cheryl and I, born just 3 minutes apart, have shared everything. Our childhood secrets, a bedroom for 16 years, the same beauty school, and eventually the ownership of our little salon on Hawthorne Avenue. We even share the same laugh, though hers is softer, like a secret blooming under her breath. But we've never shared something like this. Not until Malcolm. Malcolm is her son, not mine. I still remember the weight of him in my arms the day he was born. Cheryl exhausted me, crying more than the baby. He was a perfect little thing with dark eyes and a temperamental brow even then. I loved him like he was mine. But never, not in the years of babysitting birthday parties or scraped knees, did I think I'd love him the way I do now. It started innocently, though how innocent can a full-body waxing really be? He was 23, a senior at the university downtown, studying graphic design. Smart, a bit quiet, but always polite in that old-fashioned way that's rare these days. He'd grown tall, so tall that when he came in for that first appointment I barely recognized him. His voice had deepened and he had this confidence, the kind that comes right before manhood fully settles in. He smiled and asked if I could take him as a walk-in. Said he needed the full service, chest, arms, back, and everything else. I raised an eyebrow. Everything? I asked, tilting my head in a way that usually made the younger clients blush. But not Malcolm. He met my eyes. All of it, he said. I still remember how Cheryl had chuckled when I told her later that day. He's grown up, Sean, she said with a smirk, sipping from her lemon water. You gonna survive that appointment? She didn't mean anything by it, not then. The session itself had its moments. I wore gloves. I kept it professional. Always do. But there was this flicker between us, like a glint of something sharp in a mirror. Malcolm cracked jokes to lighten the mood. I laughed too much. He flinched, I soothed. At one point, as I was working the strip near his hip bone, our eyes met, and it was like someone opened a door I didn't even know existed. He came back 2 weeks later. Then again the next month. By the third appointment I stopped pretending it was just work. We flirted. Carelessly at first. Teasing glances. His compliments that lingered just a little too long. You always smell like vanilla and ozone, he told me once. I asked what ozone smelled like. He said, you. Then there was the kiss. It was a rainy Thursday, slow in the salon. Cheryl was in the back doing paperwork. I was finishing Malcolm's touch-up and he leaned up, just a little, as I tossed a used wax strip in the bin. Our faces were close, breath mingling. He said, you ever wonder if some things aren't as wrong as they feel? I didn't answer. I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't delicate either. It was hunger and surprise and heat. When we pulled apart, I saw it in his eyes. That wildness, that vulnerability that said he'd been waiting for that moment for a long time. I shouldn't have done that, I whispered, fingers still on his shoulder. He nodded. I'm glad you did. That night I told Cheryl. She didn't shout. Didn't judge. Just looked at me the way she always has, quiet, sharp, and deeply knowing. You've always loved fiercely, Sean, she said. If you're going to do this, just don't lie to yourself. It wasn't permission exactly, but it was something. Now it's all a delicate dance. Malcolm keeps coming in. We keep finding excuses to linger after the salon closes. He texts me late at night. Sometimes I wake up to dreams of his hands on mine, of his lips at my throat, and I don't know if it's wrong, or if it's the truest thing I've ever felt. We haven't told anyone else. Not the other stylists. Not his friends. Just Cheryl, who's begun watching us like she's waiting for something to tip. But I've already tipped. I'm falling. And I don't think I want to stop. Malcolm didn't come back the next week. Or the one after that. At first I told myself he was busy, finals maybe, or projects. He was a good student, diligent and ambitious. That's what I told myself as I wiped down my station in silence every evening, the salon lights humming above me like a faint reprimand. But by the third week I was done lying to myself. I missed him. And I hated how much that meant. It wasn't just the kisses we'd stolen behind the locked backroom door or the way his fingertips had brushed mine like a secret he wanted me to keep. It was the space he filled. My days, my thoughts, the silence in the house I returned to every night. It was his voice echoing in my head. You ever wonder if some things aren't as wrong as they feel? I began glancing at the appointment book compulsively, hoping to see his name penciled in under mine. I even opened the app on Cheryl's tablet during lunch breaks. Nothing. His absence stung more than I expected. Then one Friday morning I found his name. 2:30 p.m. Full body waxing, Shannon only. Requested by client. The breath whooshed out of me. I stared at the screen for what felt like a full minute before I heard Cheryl's voice behind me. "You okay?" she asked. I looked up. She was sipping from her iced coffee, brows slightly arched. Her nails were freshly painted a deep wine red, and her eyes held that familiar sharp calm she always wore when she already knew the answer. "He booked again," I said. "Malcolm." Cheryl didn't blink. "Thought he would." "You don't mind." He shrugged. "I raised a son with a spine. He knows what he's doing." Pause. "Do you?" Her words hung in the air like incense, sweet, smoky, dangerous. "I think I do," I said softly. But the truth was I wasn't sure. I only knew what I felt. At 2:28 I stood by my room's doorway in my white coat, palms slightly sweaty, trying to appear neutral while my heart thundered beneath my ribs. When the door chimed I didn't look. I knew it was him. He smelled the same, cedar and something crisp like late autumn and clean skin. His hair was a little longer, jawline sharper, and when he walked into my room he closed the door behind him without a word. For a moment we just stood there, breathing. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I echoed, my throat tight. "You're mad at me." I looked away, fiddling with the drawer that held the wax strips. "You disappeared." I needed to think. "About." He stepped closer, his voice low. "About whether this, was something I could do. Something I should do." And I whispered. His hand touched mine, gently prying my fingers from the drawer. I decided I don't want to pretend like it's not happening. His lips were so close I could see the faintest scar above the left side. An old one from childhood. I remember Cheryl calling in a panic after he'd tripped on a curb during a bike ride. I had cleaned the scrape myself. That scar, that boy, now standing here like a man claiming me. "You know what this looks like," I said. He nodded. "I don't care." And then just like that I started the session. It was the most delicate dance of professionalism I'd ever performed. My gloves trembled on my hands. His skin was warm, golden under the salon light, each strip of wax placed like a confession I was too afraid to voice aloud. We didn't speak much. Every time our eyes met, the air thickened. When it was time to move to the more intimate areas, I paused. "Still want to go through with this?" I asked, forcing steadiness into my voice. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." It should have been clinical. But it wasn't. Not with him. As I worked, his fingers graced mine more than once. When I pressed a warm cloth against his lower abdomen, he reached down and covered my hand with his. His thumb brushed the back of my wrist. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with nerves. "Shannon," he said softly. I looked up. "After this, would you have dinner with me?" A silence passed between us, long and electric. I nodded. Yes. Later when I told Cheryl, again she didn't blink. She just looked at me for a long while, then sat back in the break room chair with a sigh. "You always loved with your whole heart," she murmured. "Even when it wasn't safe." "Is this dangerous?" I asked. She tilted her head. "It's only dangerous if you lie about what it is." "I'm not lying." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then be ready. Because you can't keep this secret forever." He was right. The next evening we met for dinner at a quiet place downtown. Not one of the flashy student joints, but a tucked-away Italian bistro where the lighting was soft and the music just a whisper above silence. Malcolm wore a dark button-down, the sleeves rolled halfway. I wore something soft, flowing, less salon and more woman. We talked. About everything. His classes, his frustrations with school, his love for design. He asked about my work, and for once I didn't hold back. The challenges of running the salon, the exhaustion, the satisfaction. We talked like adults who had nothing to hide. At one point he reached for my hand across the table. I let him take it. "Does it feel strange to be here with me?" he asked. I nodded. "It feels right and wrong all at once." "I don't want to hide it," he said. "Not yet," I said gently. "Not from the world." "Then just from them," he agreed. "But not from us." When we parted he walked me to my car and kissed me again. Not like the stolen moment at the salon, but slow and sure. Like he'd decided and there was no going back. I drove home in silence, fingers tingling, heart raw. And that night, I dreamed of him. Not as my sister's boy, not as someone I wasn't supposed to want, but as a man reaching out to me in the dark, asking nothing but to be held. Then was Cheryl's idea. It began as a joke. We were cleaning up late one evening after the last client had left. The fluorescent buzz of the salon lights overhead was the only noise as I wiped down my treatment table and she folded fresh towels. I don't even remember what started it. Some offhand remark about the identical nature of our work uniforms, or maybe the way our hair was pinned back the same. But she glanced over at me, a smirk teasing at the corners of her lips. "You know," she said slowly, "you should let me take Malcolm's next appointment. Just once." I blinked, half amused. "And tell him what? That I had the flu and sent my evil twin?" He shrugged. "You wouldn't tell him anything. He'd never know. We're identical, Sean. You forget sometimes." I laughed, waving her off. "Don't be ridiculous." But Cheryl didn't laugh with me. She set the towel down and leaned her hip against the counter, that playful light dancing in her eyes. "I'm serious," she said. "He's never seen us side by side during an appointment. He always walks straight into your room. Half the staff can't even tell us apart unless we're talking at the same time." "And what would be the point?" I asked, still smiling. She tilted her head. "Curiosity. Fun. Mischief." Then she leaned in. "And maybe I want to know why he makes you so flustered." I stopped wiping. "I'm not flustered." Cheryl gave me a long, slow look that said otherwise. It should have ended there. It should have remained a harmless thought. But that night after I closed up, she sent me a single text. "Let me take the next one. I promise I'll be professional. It'll be our secret." I didn't answer right away. But deep down I think I knew I would say yes. It was just a game. A sister's prank. A mirror held up for a moment. What harm could come from it? 2 days later, Cheryl took my place. We didn't swap uniforms. There was no need. We both wore the same navy smocks, same neutral makeup, same simple ponytail. I even loaned her my subtle perfume. She practiced my tone, the way I called his name when I opened the door. And when I handed her my treatment gloves, she just winked. "I'll behave," she promised. "I'm not the one in love with him, remember?" I didn't answer that. I watched from the back room as Malcolm arrived, punctual as always. He was wearing a gray Henley, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, exposing the veins in his forearms. Hooked, relaxed, confident. That same magnetic calm he always carried like a second skin. The kind of calm that made people lean in without realizing they were doing it. Cheryl called his name exactly the way I would. He followed her into the room without a second glance. I stayed close enough to listen. She didn't flirt. He was kind, warm, professional. She waxed his back, his chest, even his inner thighs, just as I had. He joked like he always did. Called her trouble, the same way he called me. And never, not once, did he seem to suspect it wasn't me. When they were done, Cheryl came back into the break room, cheeks a little flushed. I stood up immediately. "Well?" I asked, more breathless than I meant to sound. Cheryl didn't speak right away. She walked to the sink, poured herself a glass of water and sipped it slowly. Then, without turning around, she said, "He's not a boy, Sean." I frowned. "I know that." She looked at me over her shoulder. "No. I mean he's all man. Steady. Kind of. Like he's already lived 2 lives and knows what not to waste time on in this one." Something in my stomach turned. "Did he say anything strange?" Cheryl shook her head. "He was polite. Charming. Just like you said." "So he didn't know?" She met my eyes. "No. Not for a second." We stood in silence for a beat too long. Then she added, "I didn't expect to like him." I exhaled. "Well, now you know." "No," she said. "I don't think you do. The switch only happened once. We never spoke of it again, not explicitly. Cheryl never asked for another chance to take his appointment. I never offered. But something had shifted. Between all 3 of us. A sliver of knowledge sat quietly between the 2 of us sisters like a shard of mirrored glass. Because Cheryl had seen him the way I saw him. And she hadn't expected to. "He told me I smelled nice," she said days later while we prepped a bridal party. Said it reminded him of comfort. Home. "That's what he says to me," I said flatly. She smiled faintly. "Of course it is." Malcolm never suspected. If anything, he seemed even more drawn in after that session. He started texting more often. Longer messages. More personal. Asking about my day. Telling me about dreams he'd had. One night he sent me a photo of a necklace, thin gold, delicate, a small opal in the center, and said, "Saw this and thought of you. Would you wear something like this?" I stared at that message for a long time. He didn't know it hadn't been me that day. But he didn't stop wanting me. If anything, he seemed to crave me more. One night, Cheryl and I sat on the back patio, wine glasses in hand, the city humming beyond the trees. The air was heavy with coming summer. "I see it now," she said, voice quiet. "Why you look at him the way you do. He's not what you thought. No. He's better." We sat in silence, the kind only shared blood can make. "I should feel jealous," she added. "But I don't. Isn't that strange?" I smiled sadly. "No. Because you know I never took him from you. He was never yours." "Still." She looked at me sideways. "You ever think about telling him the truth?" I shook my head. What would be the point? It was one moment. One mask. It doesn't change what's real. And what's real is this. Malcolm loves me. He just doesn't know, not fully, how close he came to kissing my reflection. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that turns the air into a memory. Sticky, blurred, humming with something unspoken. The salon slowed as clients traded waxes and peels for beaches and quick shaves at home. I didn't mind. The slower days gave me more time to linger. To listen. Think. Malcolm was still coming in. Once every 2 weeks, like clockwork. He'd sit in my chair, smile, that lazy, tilted smile, and I'd ask him about his classes or his latest design project. But under every casual exchange there was a pulse. A current. Sometimes it swelled so loud I could hardly hear the words we were saying. He'd reach for a towel and brush my wrist. I'd lean too close while applying the finishing oil across his stomach. We were a breath away from the truth. Always a breath away. And Cheryl never brought it up again. Not directly. But I caught her watching him more now when he'd swing by to bring me a coffee. Her glances weren't possessive. They weren't longing. If anything, they were curious, measured. Like she was reading a novel she couldn't quite close. She'd seen what I had. What I still did. Malcolm wasn't a fling. He wasn't a curiosity. He was a man with depth carved by quiet grief and inner stillness. The kind that didn't crave attention but commanded it by simply being present. He didn't posture or play. He didn't try to win me. He simply looked at me like I was already his. And in a way I was. The last time we kissed was behind the salon during a sudden downpour. The clouds had rolled in around 4, and by 5 the skies opened up in a fit of fury. I was taking out the trash, barefoot on the slick concrete, laughing as the water soaked my blouse. He appeared at the edge of the alley, umbrella in hand but making no attempt to use it. "You'll get drenched," I shouted over the sound of rain hitting steel. He stepped forward, his shirt already plastered to his skin. "Don't care." Then without a word he reached for my waist and pulled me to him. The kiss was deep, quiet, drenched in rain and restraint. It tasted like every word we hadn't said. Like everything that was too fragile to speak. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. "Can I see you tonight?" he whispered. I nodded. Yes. But I didn't go. I sat in my car for an hour after work, hands on the wheel, watching the steam rise from the pavement. My body leaned toward him, but my mind was circling one question. How long could we stay hidden in this mirror world? It wasn't just about the age gap. Or the fact that he was my sister's son. It was the web we'd spun without meaning to. The kiss that hadn't been mine. The touch that had belonged to Cheryl, for one heartbeat, one switch, and he'd never known. And we hadn't told him. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was unease. A sense that we'd trespassed into something sacred and played with the light. We'd seen if love was strong enough to recognize its source. And it hadn't. A week later he came into the salon holding a small, wrapped box. "Happy early birthday," he said, pressing it into my hands. I hadn't told him. But of course Cheryl had. She'd probably said it offhandedly over lunch, not realizing what he'd do with the knowledge. Inside the box was the necklace, the opal he'd texted me weeks before. Delicate, shining, the exact color of dawn right before it breaks. "I thought it looked like you," he said. I touched the stone. "It's beautiful." He leaned in, his voice lower now. "I want to give you more. Not just gifts. Time. Space. Something that's ours. Something in me trembled. We were past the flirtation now. Past the point of deniability. This wasn't a game anymore. I had to decide what came next. That night I told Cheryl everything. I told her about the alley kiss, the necklace, the way he looked at me like I was the only person left in the world. She didn't speak for a while. Just sipped her wine, legs folded under her on the couch. You love him, she said eventually. I nodded. And he loves you. Then I nodded. She looked at me, eyes dark and unreadable. Then don't ever tell him. The words caught me off guard. What? Cheryl leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Don't tell him about the switch. About that day. About me. He didn't choose me, Sean. He chose you. That's what matters. But he didn't know. He didn't need to, she said, cutting me off gently. He connected with who he thought was you. That's more powerful than it sounds. I stared at her. You're okay with this? He shrugged. You've always loved more deeply than I have. You live from the heart even when it burns you. He deserves that. Pause. And you deserve someone who sees you the way he does. So we didn't tell him. We let that single day melt into the silence between us. A memory that belonged only to the sisters who once swapped places in a room full of mirrors. And when Malcolm came over that evening, flowers in hand, eyes soft with wanting, I let him in. He kissed me on the porch, slow and patient, like a man who'd already decided where he'd stay. I ran my fingers through his rain-damp hair and whispered his name like it was something I'd never stop saying. Later, in the warmth of my apartment, curled on the couch, he traced the opal around my neck. It suits you, he said. Like it belongs there. I nodded. It does. And when he rested his head against my shoulder, I didn't think about Cheryl. I didn't think about secrets or mirrors or the whisper of what could have happened if he'd known. I only thought of this. That love, when it's real, chooses us again and again. Even when it's blindfolded. Even when it's standing in front of a twin. Even when the mirror lies.